We're on video number 4 of our best of the last 16 All-Ireland winners in football. Just a reminder for anyone who hasn't seen what we're doing so far, we've done 3 of the 8 last 16 games already. Just a little refresher, we've had Dublin 2018 against Tyrone 2005, 2017 Dublin against Cork 2010, and 2004 Kerry against 2014 Kerry. So you can catch all those on ourgame.ie, and it's a public vote, so you let us know who you think should win. So ourgame.ie is the place to vote for that. Michael Verney, next game that we're going to look at here is the 2013 Dublin team that beat Mayo in an All-Ireland final against the 2012 team from Donegal that also beat Mayo.
Yeah, it's a fair matchup. It's a fair matchup. I suppose, as we were talking about off air, the common denominator is probably Mayo, and it's only when you go back through the years that you just kind of realise the amount of hardship that they've gone through and the amount of kind of close calls that they've had, and losing by a point or losing by a couple of points in an All-Ireland final. But this is this is a really intriguing matchup with some serious matchups that maybe some of them happened when they met in 11 and some of them happened when they met in 14, but to see some of these matchups in their pomp would have been unbelievable.
Yeah, absolutely. And we'll go through some of those matchups, but one thing that kind of stood out to me is they both beat Mayo, but what did both teams do after this? This was the high point for Donegal 2012. Like, they had the defensive structure in 2011, which everyone thought was vomit to watch, and that semi-final with Dublin was cat, I suppose is the nicest way of describing it, 8 points to 6. But as much as they still had that defensive discipline, their ability to burst out from the back was just like, this Donegal team was thrilling. I remember watching the Cork game, the Kerry game in the quarterfinals and the semi-finals, thinking this is unbelievable stuff to watch. But they never got to that level thereafter. Look at some of the main players, and I'll just bring them up on screen, the team from that 2012 final against Mayo.
Just while you're talking there, Shane, like when Donegal got the ball and
yeah, the underpants were fully laden any time they got the ball. But just looking at the team, did Paddy Durcan ever quite get to the same level? He was still always very good, but did he get to that quite level? Neil McGee, Carl Lacey, Footballer of the Year, don't think he was ever as unbelievable as he was that year. Mark McHugh was amazing. Really was. And you had Colin McFadden scoring a goal in the All-Ireland final. Michael Murphy, arguably his best season, although I'm sure Donegal fans would say every season that Murphy's played has been the greatest performance of all time. But then you look at the Dublin side of things. They kind of scraped across the line in 2013. Had that brilliant kind of history-breaking game against Kerry in 2011, knocked out by Mayo in 2012 in the semi-final. And this time, they just about squeaked over the line. Bernard Brogan scored 2-3. They finished with 15 players on the field, but 13 of them actually able to still play, which we'll go into in a second. But look at the trajectory of Donegal after 14 got back to the final, but never quite that same level again, whereas Dublin, curve going straight up. So I think that's a very noticeable difference when you're talking about this.
Yeah, 13 was obviously a write-off for Donegal after winning the All-Ireland. They were absolutely annihilated by Mayo in the quarter-final. Got back to the final, obviously, in 14. Probably a missed opportunity, but haven't really been in that vicinity since. Have they been in an All-Ireland semi-final since 14?
I don't think they have they?
Off the top of my head, I don't think they have. Whereas, as you say, Dublin were obviously shocked in 14 and have won every All-Ireland that's been contested ever since. So this was obviously Gavin's first year. Like, Jack McCaffrey played the All-Ireland final, was off early. Paul Mannion played the All-Ireland final, was off early. But these guys were starting off their path, a lot of them, and are now mainstays of the team. So, like, if you look at, was this Paul Mannion's best year? No way. Was it Jack McCaffrey's best year? No way. A lot of the Dublin boys have gone from strength to strength since 13, whereas Donegal were probably at their peak in 12, as you say, and probably weren't able to reach those heights again.
We had a quick look at the Donegal team there. Let's have a look at the Dublin team. So Stephen Cluxton in goal, and this was back in the era where he was still hitting frees and 45s, so he scored one each of those. Then Philly McMahon, Rory O'Carroll, Johnny Cooper, James McCarthy, Ger Brennan, Jack McCaffrey, Michael Darragh Macaulay, who ended up Footballer of the Year, and Keane O'Sullivan. Paul Flynn winning his third All-Star in a row, and he would win one the following year also. Kieran Kilkenny and Diarmuid Connolly, and then Paul Mannion, who was quite young, went off injured early on, and Owen O'Gara replaced him alongside Paddy Andrews and Bernard Brogan, who would end up as man of the match. So it's obviously a brilliant team, and history will show that they were unbelievable players. But I'm definitely leaning towards Donegal here.
Yeah, just because like Donegal were maxed out in 12. They played better throughout 12 than I'd say Dublin did throughout 13. But the only thing is with Dublin, and it's probably because of, they both played Mayo in the final, obviously, but Dublin beat Kerry in the semi-final in 13 in one of the best games ever played, like.
Absolutely, one of the all-time great games. I wonder, who from this Dublin team would stop the way Mark McHugh was playing? He was in his own square for half the game, but his ability to burst the full length of the field was, at the time, it was almost seemed a little bit inhuman. And the amount of lads overlapping, like McLean, Lacey, there's some amount of players that you have to try and contain there. And this isn't the Dublin team that was very methodical and building the ball slowly up the field like we saw the past couple of seasons, like 2018, 2019. This was a Dublin team that was pretty much balls out going for you. And I just don't know if they've been able to contain that counter-attack.
Well, did they contain it in 2014? No.
Oh, there you go.
Do you know? So, and that 2014 game, they met in 11. Donegal in 11 were totally different than Donegal in 12. So then they played in 14, obviously, when Donegal were still doing a lot of the same things, and Dublin weren't able to. Well, they were dealing quite well with it when they were 9 points to 4 up. But then all of a sudden, Donegal got a couple of goals, and the game totally changed. Now, one of the things that's obviously different from 12 to 14 was the emergence of Ryan McHugh, who obviously wasn't there in 12. Now, that's probably a big factor to take in if you're comparing the 2012 and 2013 teams against each other. But when they played in 14, Donegal got the better of them. And they didn't just get the better of them. By the end of the game, that was the soul-destroying kind of defeat for Dublin. It totally forced a change of attack from Jim Gavin and the style of play that they were going to play. So, part of me thinks if they'd met, we'll just say in 13, you can't say if they met in 13, but if they both met in their pomp, maybe Dublin would have had to make the mistakes that they made before they became what they became, if you know what I mean. I don't know if that style of football, they probably would have been exposed to that Donegal system as they were in 14.
Yeah, because McGuinness had the team for 4 years, but for my money, and I'm just kind of reaffirming what I've already said, he got the team to their very, very peak in his second season, 2012. Arguably, you could say Dublin, who, some of the players are on the go since 2009, 10, 11, that whole era, that they hit their peak around maybe 16, 17, something like that. I mean, you can debate that point of when the exact peak was, but the thing is, year 2 was the peak for Donegal. They've never been at that level since, and I think you need to go further forward for 2016 and 17 to meet any Dublin team that will be able for that 2012 Donegal team.
Yeah, no, it's a fair point. And just looking back at the 13 final, it was kind of, there's so many mad things kind of happened that day. Obviously, we talked about Dublin ended up with 13 players only left because they made some early substitutions and had no subs left. Rory O'Carroll was still on the pitch. He was still on the pitch at the end, wasn't he? After a head injury, which there'd be absolute uproar if that happened now. You obviously had Cillian O'Connor had a free at the very end when Mayo were 2 down. And apparently, so he said, he was told by Joe McQuillan that there was time, so he kicked it over the bar. Cluxon kicked the ball out. The game was over. But then you also had Gavin taking this unbelievable, unheard of broadside at Joe McQuillan after, basically saying that Dublin were playing against 16 men. Which, imagine Jim Gavin saying that in recent years, it just wouldn't happen. But I suppose he was in the position that he was able to do it. They were after winning and everything. But there's just so many things came in around that game. Dublin were definitely not at their best, but were still able to get over the line. Finishing with, they should have been exposed, playing with 13 players at the end of an All-Ireland final. They should have been exposed, but they weren't. They were still able to eke it out.
Yeah, and that's true. Like the other person, like so Rory O'Carroll had that concussion. I think all the subs were used by the 53rd minute. Owen O'Gara had done his hamstring. And like I think this is the difference between Dublin 2019 now, okay, just to jump on. They were down to 14 men and Stephen Cluxton came out and picked up one of the Kerry attackers. Whereas here in 2013, Dublin were down to effectively 13 men, even though they had 15 on the field. And you actually had two men, the goalkeeper, and I think it was Keith Higgins, back marking Owen O'Gara, who could barely move. When realistically, he could have just left the goalkeeper sweeping that area, and Owen O'Gara would have done very little, or at least had someone sort of pushing up a little bit. There was no need to be back there marking him. So, I mean, that little bit of cuteness on the field, someone should have spotted it, someone should have communicated what was going on.
Yeah, no, it's funny. Like I'd say James Horn would have loved to have that time back and thinking like, gee, well, like what was I doing? Like what were we doing? What was I doing? There was absolutely no need. Like Owen O'Gara on two legs is one thing, but Owen O'Gara hardly able to move. Like there was absolutely no need. They definitely could have pushed the goalkeeper up. Imagine having Keith Higgins' energy flying forward there. Could have been the difference. Could have maybe won another free. Could have worked another score. But like if you're talking about Mayo being the common denominator as we were earlier, Mayo Dublin were hanging on to beat Mayo in 13. Donegal always had Mayo at arm's length in 12.
Even though I thought Mayo were very good in that 2012 final, because after going well behind, they brought it back to I think 3 points at one stage, and this was a departure from the old Mayo team that when they started losing All Ireland finals, they got pasted by Kerry in them. A point I would add though is that if you were to weigh up which is better, the Dublin 2013 or Donegal 2012, I think Dublin beat the better Mayo team. I think Mayo were at their peak in 13, also 14. Those were the 2 years that, for my money, that they really should have cashed in on All Ireland. So I think, as much and all as I would go with Donegal 2012, I'd give Dublin a bit of extra credit for the team that they beat.
Oh, 100%. That was Mayo's chance, realistically. Gavin was only starting out with Dublin. Gavin had made some, like the likes of McCaffrey and Mannion and these boys kind of starting. They were long-term moves. They weren't necessarily, if you know what I mean, they weren't necessarily to win that All-Ireland. They were long-term moves. They were going to be there for a long time. And Mayo, I'm sure they would have smelled the opportunity. And basically, Bernard Brogan was the difference that day. That was his best performance. Obviously, I said some marquee performances in big games. So he was essentially the difference on that day. I would definitely say that the 13 Mayo team was a much better team than the 12 team.
We'll look at a couple of matchups then that you'd have between this Dublin 13 team and Donegal 2012. Michael Murphy got that goal, of course, catching the ball over Kevin Keenan and blasting it in at the start. Maybe Rory O'Carroll, who had marked at under 21 level, would pick him up. You're looking at maybe, like Michael Darragh Macaulay ended up being Footballer of the Year, even though he gets criticised for his skill set at times. Neil Gallagher wouldn't be the obvious sort of matchup for him. I'm not sure who probably would be. I might throw the team up there quickly again, and sort of have a little look there and see who was playing around midfield. Yeah, Rory Kavanagh, that would have made a very interesting matchup. A couple other matchups you're looking at, maybe Frank McGlynn, Carl Lacey against the likes of Paul Flynn and Dermot Connolly. So there's no shortage of brilliant matchups.
No, there's some serious matchups there. You just mentioned like Neil Gallagher and Rory Kavanagh. And, like the first thing that immediately comes to mind are obviously legendary figures within Donegal, but the two boys were eating 5 or 6 dinners a day, like to get up. The McGuinness had them eating like a crazy amount of calories and food to get up. He felt that with Kavanagh he needed to put on, I don't know what he needed to put on, the guts of a stone, I think. And he got both of them to put on a serious amount of weight while still being unbelievably mobile around the pitch. I think Kavanagh would have been the one for Macaulay probably, because Kavanagh was more of a box to box than Gallagher was probably. But some brilliant matchups there. Like Frank McGlynn, who to me is one of the most, like, he got kudos in 12 obviously, but he's one of the most underrated kind of county players career wise. He had a phenomenal career, rarely disappointed in a Donegal shirt. Carl Lacey then as well. The funny thing, and we mentioned it earlier, those guys were all at their peak for that All Ireland winning year. Was Connolly at his peak in 13? Probably not. Flynn maybe so, he was. Macaulay obviously was, but a lot of other dubs weren't in their peak. So if you're comparing those two All Ireland wins, I would have Donegal just coming out on top, because I think they were at their very best. They totally maxed out in 12. Whereas I don't think you could say the same about Dublin. They maxed out in subsequent years, but maybe not in 13.
I wonder actually where this Dublin team ranks with Dublin fans. 2011 team will probably always be right up there with maybe the 5 in a row team in terms of romance, and just because it was against Kerry the whole lot, you know. I mean, there was
Yeah,
history
but
being
in
made.
terms of romance, they'd be up there. But when you're looking at like the actual team, to me, off the top of my head, probably 11 and 13 are down towards the bottom of their All Ireland winning teams in terms of if you're looking at the team to stand the test of time. I think they're down towards the bottom, and I think the 13 team could be nearly at the bottom.
And I kind of agree with you on one side of it, but the flip side is that they had a more exciting journey. And now I know they probably beat Westmeath, Kildare, Meath pretty well, and also not too much fuss against Cork. But the game against Kerry in the semi-final and the final against Mayo, there was a bit more of a journey there, because a lot of the more recent teams, or the more recent teams that won the 5 in a row, it was just pasting teams and it was just going through the motions. So from that point of view, there was serious drama.
Yeah, I know what you're saying about the romance and the drama, but like at the end of the day, like which is more impressive if you're looking at a team pasting teams the whole way through and being comfortable, or the romance? If you're asking which is the better team on paper and haven't delivered, I would say it's some of the more modern teams in recent years.
Okay, well, I think we've kind of run through this matchup, and it's up to the public now to vote. Don't forget to go to ourgame.ie if you want to vote on this. And yeah, sure, we'll be chatting to you again soon with the next matchup.